but only because I want to maybe use some of this. I want to use some of this for trainings later. And Sandra, where did Sandra go? Yeah, that way we'll send this out to probably some of your team in advance. Okay, so first things first, why are we here?
Okay.
The whole idea of doing this on a concert tour is the idea of like peer-to-peer engagement, right? I mean, at the end of the day, realistically, of course, one show in one city isn't going to change everything when it comes to veterans health or whatever the particular cause is. But it's this idea that you're building momentum, right? And at the end of the day, those conversations that we have tonight are actually incredibly profound. And I say this because I think a lot of times it's like we get to a show, everyone gets their shirts, and we kind of get this big rush to just talk about what we literally physically have to do. And it's really important for you guys to feel kind of grounded and understand that this is part of something much bigger. And those conversations that you have tonight, no matter how short they are, actually do matter. They actually have an incredible impact. At the end of the day, nothing is more powerful when it comes to getting somebody to do something than a face-to-face conversation is. It's single-handedly the most effective way to motivate someone. Study after study shows this. And it's really kind of amazing to think we live in this digitally connected world, which is effective, and online organizing is important, and celebrity endorsements are important, but nothing is more effective than somebody who you have something in common with telling you to do something, right? Or telling you about something. And the cool thing here, the common denominator here, is that we're all fans. So when I first got into doing this work, it was about 12 years ago, and I had started a company which I still run out of LA. And we basically did sort of like messaging and outreach, kind of this sort of stuff for nonprofits. Lots of organizations do phenomenal work, but aren't always that good at articulating what they do and building support. And so I created this organization to fill that gap. And so we were working with a local civil rights group, going out to a lot of community events, and it went well. And it was sort of through random circumstances that I started going out to shows. I knew the guy that started and still runs the band's Warped Tour. I had a relationship with a venue in LA. And I pretty quickly picked up on how different it was at shows. We just did phenomenally better. And I realized fairly early on that the reason was simple. It was that you had this common bond of being fans, right? Having that one thing in common just makes people more receptive to what you have to say. So it's not just about John said it, you should do it. It's more about I'm a fan, you're a fan, look at what the fan community is doing. And that's what I love about this. I've worked with all sorts of bands. I did years with the Dave Matthews Band, almost got thrown up on, some hardcore stories there. I did an entire year with U2, I'll talk more about that in a minute. Most recently I work a lot with a band called Arcade Fire that does really amazing stuff out of, with a group out of Haiti, well, a group called Partners in Health that does a lot of work in Haiti. And I love it. I love having volunteers come out every night. I mean, this is such an important part of what we do. It's not just the logistics. It's not just the fact that we need you guys to make it happen. It's the fact that you guys become these ambassadors, and that's what we need. Believe it or not, the people you talk to will remember you, and that's a good thing. The next time they hear about a vet's issue on TV or in the newspaper, they'll remember that girl, by the way, all girls tonight. Usually we have our one token guy, but he left. So, all girls tonight. They'll remember that girl they talked to at the show, and that matters because it's that personal connection that makes all the difference. And it's you telling the story that's that personal connection that makes all the difference. I don't think anyone is military. Do we have military tonight? So we're non-military. Your husband is?
He's at home.
Okay, fantastic. So there's some tie in there, which is great. We'll talk more about the kind of stories we hear, but it really is about people making that face-to-face interaction that matters. So please keep that in mind. I know it's going to seem like, I don't know, I just took like 300 photos, or I just talked to all these people and signed them up. It's adding into it. It really does matter. You guys are also something much larger, of course, right? And on this particular leg of this tour, it's about 42 dates. So there's been 41 other examples of you guys in other cities all across America doing this, and that matters. That adds up. By the end of this tour, we will have talked to well over 10,000 people about veterans issues. And the key thing here is that this is just not something that gets talked about. This issue is not being sort of stagnated by lack of money or lack of resources. It's entirely something that's sort of in limbo right now because there is not enough public emphasis on addressing this. And until that happens, veterans continue to suffer. And so these conversations you guys have are incredibly important, you know? A couple hundred people a night might not seem like much, but you multiply that by 40, right? And then you multiply it by the, the 30 dates we have coming up later this fall, this stuff really starts to build momentum. As I mentioned, I did a year with U2, and this was in 2005, and I worked on the One campaign, which is this global initiative that Bono co-founded to combat global poverty. And when I first came onto this campaign, there was literally like 3 people working there. There was like 2 members. They had nothing. I mean, it was brand new. I literally printed their first ever t-shirts and banners. I mean, it was brand spanking new. We did 80 nights with U2 that year, about 30 with Dave Matthews. We did maybe 30 Warped Tour dates. And by the end of that year, on just the shows alone, we'd signed up about 350,000 people, right? Just the shows. And it grew exponentially. And that's the other cool thing of what you do, because your conversation won't stop with the person tonight. It's that person going home. It's that person posting something on Facebook. It's how those messages start to spread. So I want you to know that this is a very, very effective way to start and grow a campaign. And I've been lucky enough in the 10 years I've done this to really see that happen, right? The other thing that happens at all these shows too is that John's donating $1 from every ticket he sells. And those dollars add up. So we do some small scale fundraising at the booth. We'll talk more about that. But those $1 a ticket, I mean, that's anywhere from 10 grand to 15 grand a night, a lot of money in its own. But you multiply that by 40 and then by another 30 and then by maybe 2 years of tours, and you're talking a lot of money. The band Arcade Fire that I mentioned has done this $1 per ticket donation since 2007. And they're a smaller band. They're playing anywhere from about 5,000, maybe 12,000 person sized venues. They can play bigger, but they tend to be small. But even then, within 4 years, by the end of 2011, the last tour we did, they had raised about $1.6 million. There is literally a hospital being built in the Dominican Republic that was by and large funded from concert tickets from this one band. So the potential of this is just enormous, and it's so, so cool that we get to do it. In terms of why this issue and how John got involved with it and what we're really focused on, INSEER is the name of the organization. Most of you probably saw that from the information I sent you. There's a lot of acronyms, by the way, and I'm going to give you a lot of information. Do not stress about it. Honestly, the bulk of what we tell fans tonight is, look, John's working to help out vets. He's partnered with an amazing organization out of San Francisco that's doing incredible work in terms of research and advocacy. But what we need is to build a community of support, right? That's the core of our message. Realistically, limited time, all sorts of chaos going on. That said, I like you guys to feel really well grounded. I like you guys to maybe have a few little side stories that you can throw in. So as I'm telling you this, I don't want you stressing over, oh my God, I will never remember all of this, because that's not what I want you to do. I just want you to have the basics, and then I want you to essentially take whatever stands out and use that as you're talking to folks tonight. But the organization he works with, INSEER, N-C-I-R-E, and that stands for the Northern California Institute of Research and Education. Brilliant work, kind of a bad name, but that happens in life, right? And what this organization does is really threefold. Primarily, they are a research facility. They have 200 scientists and doctors on staff devoted to veterans health care. We'll talk in a minute about why that is so important, but in a nutshell, the only organization doing veterans health is, of course, the VA, and the VA is overwhelmed. The VA is not necessarily stuck in the negative context, but because of just the incredible pressure being put on the organization right now, they're not doing the innovative research. They're not able to really be the advocates that they need to be for vets. And so INSEER is working to basically augment. It's not like they want to replace the VA, they basically want to help them out. So they do incredible research around veterans health. And again, it's a complicated issue. We'll talk more about it in a second. The second thing they do is advocacy, and that's where we really come into play. Because again, at the end of the day, they can do all the research, we can throw all the money that we want to try to throw at that, but nothing's going to happen until it happens at a congressional level. You're talking about the military, and that takes public support. And the problem here is this sort of gap. Because the average American that isn't directly affected by this sees the sad story on CNN and kind of assumes it's the anomaly and doesn't that suck, but oh well, right? The average vet or military family can't really speak up for themselves. You're not going to bite the hand that feeds you, and especially if you're dependent on that institution for a job or your pension or whatever it might be. Plus, there's just a culture that says you don't really do those things. And so that's where it comes down to the average person becoming that advocate. And what we're trying to do out here and what INSEER is trying to do is really fill that gap. Fill in the fact that, you know, the average person is unaware and likewise not putting pressure on their representatives or just even spreading the word. So advocacy is sort of what they unintentionally got into. It wasn't a part of their initial mission, but they've sort of found themselves morphing into that. The third thing they do, which isn't official, but I've seen it enough, and I think it's really impressive, is they basically act as sort of like an umbrella agency, meaning you don't walk into INSEER to get treatment or services. They're not capable of that, as most organizations would struggle. However, there are a multitude of amazing, very local, community-based organizations throughout the country working to help vets, and they're very effective at it. The problem is it's hard to find those, and it's hard to get access to that. And we kind of take for granted what goes into research. It's not just a simple Google search, right? And even that isn't accessible to everybody, you know? And so INSEER, and I've seen them do this firsthand, has this amazing network and this amazing ability to connect people to the resources in their community. Some of their staff were at our show in San Francisco. We literally had a Coast Guard member who was based in Iowa. I don't understand that, by the way, but whatever. That part didn't make sense to me. But they could rattle off the top of their heads 3 or 4 places that this military member could go to get services. I mean, an amazing resource in that regard. So that's the bulk of what they do. Research and education, working to really change the way we treat veterans. Advocacy, building more support for all of this. And then thirdly, actually linking vets to the resources within their communities. So is that all making sense? That's them in a nutshell. The VHIP on your shirt, the VHIP, we'll talk more about that in a second, but that stands for Veterans Health Integration Program. That is part of INSEER. It's a pilot that they have started with John. John literally is funding this 100%. And we'll talk more about how that got going and how it works. But it's all the same thing. And again, you can see why at the end of the day, I usually just tell people, this is what John's doing to help vets. It's really good, right? It's kind of a mouthful. In terms of how John gets involved with this, it wasn't anything that he sought out. You probably saw from my talking points the backstory. He was visiting Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, about 4 years ago now. He'd gone to study Krav Maga, because that's what you do if you're John Mayer. You study Krav Maga. And there's some sort of big conference going on. It's like an Israeli form of martial art. This is my Krav Maga imitation, but it's probably not very good. That's what I do, though, when I tell people the story. Now you know. See, exactly. You learned something new.
Can you say that word again, that's slow?
Krav Maga.
I'm from the South.
That's okay. Krav Maga. He's down there, nothing to do with vets, but someone at the local Wounded Warrior chapter found out there's big time celebrities down there, went through the right channels, was like, hey, would this guy be interested in meeting with our vets? And he's a very charitable guy. Before this, he was, and still is, actively involved with like music in schools programs, environmental causes. He's totally down for it. He goes in thinking that, it's 20, 30 minutes, I'll shake some hands, take some pictures. What he did not anticipate was being fundamentally changed by that interaction. And the reaction that he had from that, I gotta say, I think I can relate to at this point because I've had it the entire tour. It's someone who volunteers telling you something that just makes your head explode, How did you wait 15 months to get approved for disability when you got blown up in Iraq? It was clear what happened. And in that time, you weren't getting any money, so you lost your house. And you're still waiting to get access to basic medical care, right? These are the stories that you're like, that can't be true, that can't be happening. I have heard them over and over and over again this summer. I mean, at some point you're like, well, this isn't the anomaly. This is becoming the norm. And John had the same reaction. He was just flabbergasted. And it wasn't like sob stories. It was just people saying, this is what I'm doing. This is the way it is. And it really, really impacted him. And from that point forward, much as it's kind of happened with me too, he felt compelled to basically do something about it. I went into this campaign knowing a lot about it, certainly caring about it quite a bit. But I won't lie, this has fundamentally changed me. Like hearing these stories night after night has really made me, just rethink a lot of things and just realize how kind of messed up it is right now. And so John has a reaction like that. Gets linked up with Inseer randomly through Sesame Street. He got asked to appear on Sesame Street. It was an episode or a series of episodes they did for kids that have parents in the military. In fact, it's been turned into a USO show now. It travels. And his whole contingency was, I'll totally do this, but I want you to connect me with somebody that's working on these issues. Like, who do I work with to get involved with this? And that's actually how he found Inseer. And he's been involved ever since, and he's very involved. He's not a research scientist, FYI. He's not a doctor. But what he does have are two important things. He's got access to media, and he uses that. He tries to talk about these issues. And again, it's not kind of a cause of the day for most celebrities. So it's actually really important to have someone in his stature talking about it. And then he's donated a considerable amount of money, not just the dollar a ticket, a considerable amount of his own personal wealth has gone towards this cause, And at the end of the day, his wealth, of course, came from fans, right? So it goes back to my original point that all of this stuff kind of gets generated out of music, and we're just sort of adding to that legacy. In terms of the need, when you're talking about the veterans' health, you're essentially talking about the VA, right? That is about the only place that you go. The VA right now is under extreme pressure, and there's a couple of reasons for that. There are roughly 23 million veterans in this country right now. I want you to think about that for a minute. That's basically LA, New York, and Chicago put together, right? That's a lot of people. It's 23 million vets. All of those vets are essentially dependent on this one system. I mean, some are vets who, of course, have their own private health care, but depending on the nature of their injury or whatever else it might need, sometimes they're coming back to the VA because they can't afford that health care, right? There's a variety of issues there. When you talk about vets, you're not just talking about one type of person. You got to remember that you're talking about people who are from World War II and Korean War, right? There's an aging population and a considerable amount of veterans from those conflicts that are still alive, and they've got all sorts of conditions. Some of those are age-related conditions, some of those aren't. You've got a sizable population of Vietnam-era veterans, also dependent on this system, right, for a variety of needs. And then you certainly have the most recent wave, which are veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, and there's a ton of those. The VA is basically, expected to treat a multitude of conditions, right? I mean, there's a multitude of conditions that fall under that umbrella. It's not just war-related injuries, it's also cancer and heart disease, right? But it's also sort of these catastrophic injuries that happen on the other end of that spectrum. So it's the sheer number on one hand. It's also the fact that on this other end of the spectrum, you have got a ton of people, way more than was ever expected, coming in with catastrophic injuries. And what I mean by that is what we know basically from the doctrines from that era is that no one really anticipated those conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan to go on for a decade or more. So the sheer number of people that are dependent on this system wasn't really anticipated. And then secondly, the kind of twisted irony is that you are much more likely to survive an injury that would have killed you 2 wars prior. But the problem is these are catastrophic injuries and they require a lifetime of care. So on one hand, it's great you survived, but on the other hand, this system is just not designed to provide this continuous care, right? And to really treat it at the root of its problem. One of the biggest problems, for example, facing the VA right now is prescription drugs. There was just an article floating around a few days ago about how prescription drug overdoses amongst veterans is higher than any other population right now. Not necessarily intentional. What's happening is, and I heard this story firsthand, we had a great woman named Leslie volunteer about a month ago. She's been in the Army for 30 years, enlisted at 18, was injured by an IED in Afghanistan. I do this because she injured her knee. You're not supposed to know that. You're supposed to somehow magically know that. And she's been waiting, the last time I saw her, she had been waiting about 11 months to see a physical therapist. And what she had been getting in the meantime were prescriptions for really heavy narcotics because they don't want her to be in pain, but they can't actually address the issue. And what's happening a lot too is that doctors can't actually take time and see patients. They can't get sort of the background history and learn about other medications they're on. So you have this really dangerous cross-medication kind of happening, right? People are developing dependencies to these really heavy-duty narcotics. And that's just one example of the kind of stuff that's going on right now. When Leslie volunteered with us, she was really adamant. She's like, the one thing I wish people understood who aren't in the military is that we don't have the day-to-day health coverage that people think we do. It's not like we can just walk into a clinic and get seen. Like, we're dependent on this system, but this system is so overburdened and it takes forever to get the most basic need met. You certainly are going to get treated on the battlefield, right? I also had an Air Force medic, an active duty medic volunteer, and the way she put it was, look, I can tourniquet your leg that got blown off on the field and get you home. The problem is when you get home. The problem is when you get home, you're waiting for a year to get physical therapy or, to get treated for a prosthetic. You're waiting forever to get approved for disability. I mean, think about that. If you had to wait 15 months to get approved for disability, meaning you weren't getting any of your income in that time, it's totally conceivable that you would lose your house or your apartment, your car, and that's literally what's happening. You see these stories on CNN, and it's kind of easy to assume, that person didn't figure out the paperwork right, or they didn't know what they were doing. And the thing of it is, this is becoming the norm, right? Leslie said that within her community, which was in northern Missouri, she volunteered in Springfield, Illinois. She's like, within my community, almost every vet I know has lost their house, right? And that's just mind-boggling. It's like you got blown up in a war. There's no doubt that you were injured on the job. I mean, if you were to use this in sort of a workplace injury context, it makes no sense whatsoever. But this is what's happening, and it just keeps happening over and over and over. Post-traumatic stress is a huge issue, right? We read a lot about it in the news, but there's an amazingly little bit of research done around this. There really isn't a lot to treat it. Even what we just saw happen in DC with that shooting a few weeks ago, by all accounts, was linked to psychosis. It was linked to someone that had a mental disorder, and it probably was linked to PTSD. PTSD is nothing new. I share this story with volunteers because it totally didn't even dawn on me until I did this work this summer. But I never met my paternal grandfather. He died when I was really, really young. And my whole life it was how, he had a drinking problem and was kind of depressed. He was a baseball player. Pitched one season for Pittsburgh and he served in Korea and it destroyed him. And everyone knew it destroyed him, but in hindsight, I'm sort of like, he had PTSD. He had classic PTSD, but that was an era when you didn't really talk about it, right? World War II vets came home with that condition. Why are so many Vietnam era veterans homeless or suffering with chemical dependency? It's PTSD, right? And we're dealing with another generation of it suffering to some extent even greater, and it's still not really being talked about, right? There's still sort of a culture that says you don't address it. If you get honorably discharged from the military for medical reasons, and the reason is PTSD, you only get a percentage of your pension. Couldn't make that up. You don't get 100% of your pension the way you would do for a physical injury. Or if you want to stay in the military, but you want to get treated, you don't talk to anybody. Because if you get diagnosed for PTSD, you don't go back out in combat. You basically ended your career effectively. So there's a whole stigma attached to it. There's not a lot of resources developed to it. And that affects all of us, right? Even if you don't have anyone close to you in the military, that person suffering PTSD is your bus driver. It's the guy working at Starbucks. It's the person at Home Depot. You just don't know. And it's affecting so many people. The suicide rate amongst Iraq and Afghanistan era veterans right now is something like 20 a day. Something like 20 a day veterans are taking their own life, right? That's a crisis. That's an astronomically high number given the fact that they all are sort of like coming from this similar shared experience. So when we talk about these issues, I say that not to bum you out, but just to really emphasize the fact that this isn't just a novelty. Wouldn't it be nice? You're talking about people who signed up to do something, were promised something in exchange, and they're basically not getting it. And instead what they're getting is quite literally their lives are ruined. If their life isn't taken from them, they're losing everything that they had materially speaking. Families are being disintegrated because of it. They're spending years of their life working through a bureaucracy just to get the most basic treatment that they need. I had a vet in Boston come up to the table, and he'd served in Desert Storm, so in the early 90s, right? Our first kind of one of the first conflicts, modern era with Iraq. And he's showing me the scars he still has from that. He's telling me how he now works a full-time job, so he has his own private insurance, but he's still dependent on the VA for some of his medication-related PTSD, which is quite expensive. He takes it daily. He said there's times where I wait weeks to get it. He lost like all of his lower teeth in some explosion, and he never got them back. That blew my mind. He showed me, he's like, he just got little like bolt things there. I mean, it was crazy. Like, how did you lose your teeth on the job and no one gave you teeth again? You know, it's these sort of things that are just mind-blowing. But again, you guys, it was these stories I just kept hearing over and over and over this summer, and they're really motivating. You know, you'll be surprised tonight. You'll meet vets, and the extent to which so many vets feel compelled to kind of tell you their experience, because I think they feel kind of hidden. They feel like no one is paying attention to them. They feel like no one really cares. And part of what we're trying to do is create a community of people that do care, that do want to address this. When I talked about VHIP earlier, this pilot program, so again, VHIP, it's John's kind of collaboration with INSEER. And basically what this is all about is he went to them and he's like, look, I'm going to continue supporting you and working with you, but what would be like the most effective way? I'm going into this tour. What could I do that's the most effective right now? And they basically came back with two things. The first is the bulk of what we're doing tonight. Help us build a community of people who aren't military but care about this issue. And that's really where we're coming into play right now, right? The second thing they said was, in terms of your financial donations, we would love to use those in sort of a pilot program. Essentially, when you do research, especially medical research, it's this continuous what comes first, the chicken or the egg syndrome. Meaning, in order to get access, say, to the VA or to get big money to, we're being attacked by bugs. It's okay. It's just some sort of beetle. It's okay. I can't. It's just a beetle. There you go. It's all good. Now it's on your foot. That's karma. What happens a lot of times is that organizations kind of get caught in this cycle. In order to get research money to really impact things in a massive way, you have to prove that what you're going to research is going to work, right? But how do you prove that what your research is going to work if you don't have the money to start the research in the first place? Does that make sense? So it's a sort of continuous cycle. And what INSEER basically said was, look, if we had some seed money to really invest in some of the key things that we're working on right now, we could roll this stuff out. We could probably start working with the VA. We could probably start actually impacting lives right away. And that was the idea. And so John said, sure, I'm in. So that VHIP on your shirt is literally a pilot project between John Mayer and INSEER that John has funded 100%. Like, when I first came on, I thought, oh, that's a nice press thing to say, but what's the real story? But it's absolutely true. This thing only exists because he's donated his money to it. Which, again, it's super cool to think that what we're going to do tonight literally will improve the quality of life for veterans. And just so you guys know, and again, you might mention some of this, there's 4 key areas of research around this. The first area of research is overall wellness. So what does it mean to be well? What does it mean to be healthy, right? Getting away from just sort of the narcotic approach to treating somebody and really thinking broadly, what about nutrition? You know what I mean? You lost your leg, how are you going to exercise now? Are you happy where you live? What is your mental state like? So it's this really kind of 360 approach to wellness, which again, you got to remember, the VA is an organization that's kind of rooted in World War II. Like, I hate saying that, but it's true. And I've heard this time and time again from other people that have been vets or active duty, that basically their approach is kind of like, all right, we'll stick a Band-Aid, we'll fix you up for this obvious thing, but it doesn't go much beyond that. You know, you lose a limb, here's your prosthetic, but it doesn't really think about the sort of mental ramifications of that, of losing a limb and what is it like to live. It doesn't think about how you're going to go back to work. What are you going to do for a job? What if you like playing basketball? What are you going to do now, right? The VA is kind of limited in their scope to really address this. And so this VHIP program is going to address that. The second program is post-traumatic stress. As I said before, this is a huge, huge issue. The research around it's been limited. There hasn't been much done, for example, on PTSD in women. Like, women seem to be underdiagnosed with PTSD, and yet they're believed to suffer in a completely different way than men do. So really investing resources in that, trying to break the stigma of veterans seeking out help for PTSD. The third program is all about acclimation. So thinking about what it's like to go from military life to civilian life, right? And even if you didn't serve a tour of duty, it's still a drastic change. The unemployment rate amongst veterans tends to be higher than the general population. So it's addressing questions like that. Why does that happen? I mean, we treat the military experience as this thing that's supposed to give you job skills and help you get work, and yet veterans are chronically unemployed, you know? I have a cousin who's in his mid-30s now, and he's been in the Air Force since he was about 20, and he was pretty much done about 8 years into it, and I was really surprised when he re-enlisted. And I asked him why, and that was basically it. He was like, I literally put bombs on planes. Like, I don't know what I could do outside of law enforcement in the private sector. And there's no doubt that he has a series of skills that are probably very applicable to the private sector, but he didn't see the connection, and I think a lot of vets don't. So it's sort of addressing all that, and certainly the sort of social, emotional aspects of going from military life to private life. And then the fourth component of this pilot is women's health. More women serving than have ever served before. And again, a remarkable lack of research really done into what that means. There's also a really unfortunate reality we're hearing more and more about, which is sexual assault in the military. And there's been some congressional hearings. Leslie, who volunteered with us, that was her second thing that she actually wanted shared with volunteers from there on out, was that, in her opinion, up to half of the women that serve are assaulted at some point. She had 3 of her best friends get assaulted and was kind of blown away by the fact that they really didn't get much support. One friend was really, really traumatized by it. Leslie encouraged her to seek help from the VA. She got very good counseling, and then a bill in the mail because they didn't, there was no due process. None of her supervisors would acknowledge that this happened on the job. So she literally got billed for that very therapy. And this is an ongoing problem. And it's not just women. Men are also assaulted, and it's not spoken about. And so this program that's focused on women's health kind of embraces all of these things. Again, a super cool thing to have happen, literally directly impacting the lives of veterans, and it's all coming, from what we're doing here today. So a lot of information, but is that making sense to you guys, for the most part? Okay, so to wrap up, let's talk about what we're going to do tonight. We obviously can't solve all of these problems, but what we can do is have a lot of conversations about it, right? And that's where it starts. I'm not a believer in awareness for awareness' sake, but we can have a really positive impact just by being out here tonight. And so essentially what we're asking fans to do are basically 3 things. The first thing we want them to do is to join our online community. Insteer and John envision this turning into Google Chats, and ultimately we're hoping that we can cultivate some community volunteers from those folks you talked to tonight. The only way we're going to be able to follow up with them is if they join this online community. So it's basically an email list. It's nothing spam, nothing sold. In fact, they still haven't even emailed yet. We're talking about that right now. I'm working with them to get moving on it. But it's all about veterans health and the Mayor fan community. They're going to sign up for that. We'll talk more about this in a minute on their smartphones. We have a really simple landing page, and that's where they're going to go for that. After they do that, the second thing we want them to do, which is fun, is take their photo in front of the backdrop, right, and share it on their social media. So it's sort of our way of spreading the word about this. It's this idea that you're standing for veterans. You're going to share that with your friends and family. The photo gets taken on their actual phone, so one of you will be a photographer tonight. You're the one taking photos all night long. And then the fan is given their phone back, we don't steal them, and told, hey, upload that to your social media and use the hashtag Paradise Valley. And Paradise Valley is obviously the name of the new album. It was easy to remember. It's easy for people to hang on to. What's really cool about that is that if you search that hashtag, and everyone knows what hashtags are. You saw Jimmy Kimmel and Justin Bieber, right? Hashtag, or not Kimmel, who was it? The other guy, whatever.
Jimmy
Fallon, the other one.
Yeah.
By searching those hashtags, you see just a stream of thousands of those photos. And what I love about it is that every single one of those people talked to one of you guys about veterans health, right? Maybe it wasn't super in-depth, maybe they were a little drunk, but at the end of the day, they had that conversation, and more importantly, they've got this photo that kind of reminds them and it encourages them to kind of seek it out. It's really cool. If they do those 2 things, they get one of the awesome blue wristbands, courtesy of our wristband girls. And then the third thing we ask them to do, backtrack, they get a free wristband, so we have an incentive, right? And the idea behind the wristbands, of course, was that these lovely ladies, and time allowing, I want you to share your story in a minute, they basically started selling these at shows a couple of years ago, right? It was initially a fan community thing. More and more people wanted them. So out of their own pocket, they print them, they start selling them at shows, and they basically donated all of their profits to John's charities supporting veterans. For this particular tour, John and his management team were basically like, look, that's fantastic, but what's more valuable right now than those dollars is actually the conversations. And so we literally are using those as an incentive to have a conversation. So you don't get that blue wristband unless you've talked to one of you guys, joined the email list, and taken a photo. And we could be hard asses about it. Like, I don't care. You have to do those things. You're not getting it. The other thing that's going to happen tonight is if they do both of those things, which are totally free to do, they are entered to win one of 2 pairs of front row tickets. So when they sign up, their emails go into a Google Doc. It's literally a Google form that we use for the sign-up sheet. I literally open that Google Doc at about 8:30 and just randomly pull 2 winners and give them a phone call. One of the things on the form is a phone number, and if people ask you what that's about, you just tell them it's for the contest. Make sure it's a cell phone that you have on you. We'll talk more about these nuts and bolts in a minute. So if they join the online community by talking to you guys, take their photo and upload it. And they don't literally have to show us that they uploaded it. That's kind of ridiculous because sometimes it takes a long time. But they promise us they're going to upload it. They get a free wristband. They're entered to win front row tickets. And then the third thing we then ask them is if they would like to make a small donation. We have stickers and we have leather cuffs available. And if they make a donation, all of that goes back to supporting these initiatives. And the idea there really is it's the fan community kind of matching what John is doing, right? It's a way of showing support. And as an organizer, I always actually really like low-key fundraising like that because you sort of get people involved at just this deeper level. And I think that's really, really important to do, right? So is this all making sense to you guys? Sign up, take the photo, both things are free. If you do that, you get the blue wristband and a chance to win. And then the last ask, which happens at the table, so 2 or 3 of you are gonna be working the table tonight. The last thing that they get asked is to make the small donation in exchange for stickers and wristbands. And I'll explain the prices and all that in a minute. Okay, so let's talk about jobs, because what we're gonna do next is have you guys amongst yourself, right? It's like Lord of the Flies, you're all on your own. Amongst yourselves, you guys are gonna figure out who's doing what, okay? So we have got, and Sandra, are you hanging for a bit, or you want to?
For a bit, yeah.
You're good volunteering. We'll probably put you in the line ambassador role. You'll see what I mean in a minute, just so that way, since you're taking off early. Sandra, just so you guys know, wasn't signed up for today. She is volunteering in Albuquerque and Phoenix. There are only shows that I can't be there, so we have lead volunteers taking the lead there. Since she was coming tonight, though, she offered to come by to kind of be our liaison, so she's going to help out those teams. So I just wanted her to see this and be familiar with it. Okay, so. Otherwise, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Okay, I can't count to save my life. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, plus Sandra's 13. Okay, so I'm just going to count it as 12 with the idea that you'll be this line ambassador. Yeah. That's one of the trickier jobs, too, so if you do it, even if just for an hour, it'll be great because you can train the other line ambassadors at each show, and that's what I'll tell everybody. Okay, so otherwise, let me just break this down really quick. Okay, so here's the jobs. 5 of you, and you guys can maybe remember this, I'll show you my notes. She's like, I can't remember. 5 of you are gonna be the line ambassadors. So what happens is people come up to the booth, they're like, yay, photo, I'm so excited. And then we get to be all hard ass and be like, you can't take the photo until you talk to me. And that's the idea, is they are not allowed to take a photo until they've talked to you and joined the online email list, okay? So what we do is we line them up. And unfortunately, it looks like a million things are set up next to us, but we'll deal with that. So we'll figure out a way that the line goes. The line's probably gonna go that direction. While they're in line, you guys, that are line ambassadors, there's 5 of you plus Sandra, so 6 until she leaves. You're the ones that go up and you say, awesome, thanks for stopping, appreciate you doing that. Here's what this is all about. It's a really quick explanation. We'll practice it. It's basically just, look, this is an amazing thing John is doing. I imagine you 2 will probably be line ambassadors, so these guys will get you trained on it. Quick explanation, and then you get them to sign up. I have laminated signs that you guys hold. Those signs have the URL address, which is what's on your shirt/sign up. So vhip.org/sign up. There's also a QR reader. So if people have that QR scanner on their iPhone or whatever, they can just scan it, takes them right to the website. Should work fine. I know it takes longer to sign them up this way. We don't really care. It's way more effective. It's way better than getting them handwritten and they're messy and half of them bounce. We do have clipboards as backup, but generally speaking, volunteers don't have much of a problem with this. Most people can access it on their phone. And likewise, a lot of volunteers have taken to also having that page open on their smartphone. And if people have a hard time, or if you're just a quick typer, you don't let people touch your phone, that's kind of icky. But what they usually do is have people dictate to them, and they just punch it in. I also have an iPad, although I don't think we've got a Wi-Fi connection out here, but if it works, I've got an iPad I also send out. So 99% of the people, honestly, can sign up that way. On an average night, if we have 350 people sign up, honestly, only maybe 20 of them use the clipboard. Most of them sign up digitally, okay? And you can also lie and say, oh, your odds are better, or whatever it takes. So the line ambassadors, that's your job. You keep them, and you also kind of keep the line in order, okay? So 5 of you will do that. 3 people are on the table. What basically happens at the table is that they get signed up in line, they go take their photo. One of you is going to be a camera person. They go take their photo gets taken, the camera person sends them to the table. The people at the table, if you're gonna do the table, you gotta be good with being like, this is what you do. You can't be passive. You gotta be like, this is how it is. I think you did it in Chicago, right? You were very good at it. And basically what you say is, awesome. So, you just took your photo, I saw. You're gonna upload it, right? Yeah, I'm gonna upload it. What hashtag are you gonna use? I pose it as a question. Paradise Valley. Okay, great, Paradise Valley. The person at the table will have a self-inker, and it's got the hashtag Paradise Valley plus the VHIP website. You try to stamp everybody's hands with that, right? So that's your first job. Then you ask the second part, which is, did you join that email list while you were in line? And you can reemphasize, if you didn't do that, there's no way you're winning the contest, because that's how we get your info, right? You ask those 2 questions. If they have yes and yes, great, here's your free wristband. Thanks for doing that. The other thing we're asking fans to do tonight is make a small donation and match what John is doing. If you donate 20 bucks, you get a leather wrist cuff like the one she's wearing, plus 3 stickers. Otherwise, the leather wrist cuffs are 15. Stickers are like 1 for 3, 2 for 5, 5 for 10, right? So however you can give is great. Whatever you can give is great, but we're just asking that you donate. You always start, though, by asking for the $20 donation, right? You always start higher. Does that make sense? So to do the table, there'll be 3 of you. You just got to be really good at being like, this is what we need. Are you going to do it? You're very matter of fact, a little bit of a teacher thing. Leslie, this vet I talked about already, was really good at that. She literally was like, it's like church people. Come on, let's do this, right? And she was great at it. So you have fun, but you got to be direct. One person is on camera. That person is taking pictures on other people's smartphone, right? You've got to have a good eye for that. You need to be able to crop it really tight. I'll work with you on that. You got to be pretty loud too. You got to be like, all right, let's do this. You got to get that line moving because if a show like this, I'm anticipating having a pretty big line. So you got to be able to kind of move things along, get people going, and have a good eye. You remind people after you take the photo, you're going to upload this using your social media and use the hashtag Paradise Valley, right? So people on average have got to be told something new 3 times, and that's why we remind them again at the photo point what to do. I need 2 people to be wranglers. Now these people have these big signs that say, win front row tickets, ask me how. And so you're the people that kind of get to float around, not too far. You basically have to stay within eye shot of the booth. This is a little bit of an unusual campaign, especially for people that have done reverb, where we're not floating around. Everything kind of happens at the booth. But nonetheless, these are the people that help drive some traffic over, kind of help keep order. Okay, so you've got to be really outgoing. It's not like a crazy sign spinners thing, right? Because that just doesn't work. You've got to be able to look at somebody. So you're already saying you're good at it. You got to be able to look at somebody sitting and be like, hey, you guys don't have blue wristbands yet. Why don't you come over, check this out? They're free and you can help out some vets, right? Or as people walk by, you're like, hey, I see you. You're looking at me. You want free tickets, don't you? Right? So you kind of do that thing.
Asleep.
And then I need 1 person to be the pit boss.
Position.
Okay? Now the pit boss or the enforcer is someone that basically helps me. It's what I do too. And this person is just kind of roaming around. I might place you in a certain spot to keep the line in order. The line is like a big deal, okay? The line has got to stay in order or else people just take off. It turns into chaos. I'm usually not like that, but I learned early on doing this that if we don't have like a really good functioning line, people are coming in from all sides or they just look at it, it looks like a mess and they take off. So the enforcer kind of makes sure that the line's moving. What's really common is that the line ambassadors, and the line ambassadors, if no one's there, you're also kind of hustling and getting people to stop. What happens a lot though is a line ambassador stops somebody 20 feet away and just starts signing them up, which is fine, but now when that person's done, there's a line 25 long of other people waiting for their photo. So the enforcer just kind of helps that. They make sure everything's moving, that people are in line, that people aren't. What's really common too is that if we have a line going this way, people start to come in this way for the photo. The photographer doesn't know that because the photographer honestly is so focused on what they're doing, they don't realize this. The photographer, whoever you are, should get in the habit of asking everyone, did you sign up for the email list before you take that phone? But nonetheless, it just gets confusing, okay? So is all this making sense? So we're gonna have, and again, I'll let Sue kind of wrangle this. So we need 5 line ambassadors. We need 3 table people. And again, assuming Sandra, you're gonna be our 6th line ambassador. And these 2 probably will do it too. So, realistically, just like 3 more of you on that. 1 camera person, 2 wranglers, and 1 enforcer. So the enforcer can't be timid. You got to be good at being like, come on, people, let's move over here, right? You're friendly and you're easygoing, but you got to be on it. 8, 9, 12. All right, so what I'm going to do is go over to the table. I got some more stuff to put out. And I want you guys as a group to figure out who's doing what, okay? So you got to work together, teamwork, like that horrible Wonder Pet song goes. That'll be in your head today, too. I'll give that to Sue. Thank you
You're
for
going to have to
filming.
pry it from my hand because my arm's asleep.
Thank you.